Can we please ensure that the House is quiet and that the appropriate officers are in place? I'd like to commence. We're already 22 minutes past 1. We need one more member, Sarge. Before we took the luncheon break, the Honorable Minister for the Environment was speaking. He has 1 hour remaining. Honorable Minister responsible for the environment.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the mover of the motion talked about the composition of the council and complained that there's no north side representative of the council or on the council. Madam Speaker, each district is supposed to have a committee, and each district is represented on the council in the form of the National Trust, in the form of the chairman for each council, each district council. Now, Madam Chair, I have been involved years ago with the National Trust. I was a legal advisor to the trust at one point. I was a member of the council. I believe I'm right in thinking, remembering I was a deputy or vice president or vice chairman. And I do recall that there have been many instances where the district committees for the trust haven't operated properly. But that's not necessarily a fault of the trust itself. It could very well be, and it generally is, that the district committees just don't meet and operate properly. But the law provides, Madam Speaker, the law provides that the chairman of each district committee should be represented on the council. And that is set out, Madam Speaker, in Section 5, subsection 3 of the National Trust Law, where it says, the council should consist of the following members. A, the chairman, vice chairman, secretary, treasurer, and 9 members who shall be elected at the annual general meeting for such term as shall be established under the bylaws made under Section 16. B, 3 members appointed by the governor, 1 each nominated by the ministries responsible for natural resources, education, and tourism matters, who shall hold office at the pleasure of the governor. And C, the 7 persons being the chairman of the district committees. So, Madam Speaker, the law provides ample opportunity for district representation. It just happens that for whatever reason, there are, from time to time, issues with district committees not functioning and not having chairmen who are willing to participate and who are willing to serve on the council to ensure that their districts are adequately represented. Madam Chair, many of the council are Caymanians, but certainly there's nothing in the law which requires that either the membership or the council is exclusively or by some particular number Caymanian. And it clearly was considered to be an issue that was intended. Otherwise, it would have been set up that way when the government, when the members of this committee, that was the steering committee that were creating the National Trust bill, put it together. And that's the way it should be. We should have people here residents here who are involved, who serve on things like the National Trust, who get involved in our community, who work side by side with Caymanians to protect and preserve what reflects value to Caymanians in the form of our natural environment, our culture, and our heritage. Now, there are many, many Caymanian families that have a long record of involvement with the National Trust. There are Fosters, there are Merins, there are Coes, there are Ebankses. These are all people and names that we all recognize, and these are people that have been involved with the Trust. There have been many others over the years as well. So it's a shame, Madam Speaker, that there are times when districts are not properly represented because the committees for those districts aren't operating properly. But I would submit that that is not a failure necessarily of the body of the National Trust, and it doesn't derogate from the important functions, the important objectives, and the exercise of the powers by the Trust, which it properly has. Now, Madam Speaker, there's one thing about the mover from Northside which is interesting in relation to the National Trust. He is nothing if not absolutely persistent in his attacks and his criticism of the National Trust. And then I have never been able to figure out exactly why he feels that way. Even in this case, Madam Speaker, I found it very difficult, and I think I have outlined why that is the case. He has referred to the National Trust as this evil empire. He says that there are things going on which was feared to begin with, I think was his expression. Nothing that is reflected in the Hansard of this Honourable House and the proceedings of this Honourable House when this bill was being considered reflects anything in the way of fears of an evil empire. It has been made very clear what powers the Trust has, why it has those powers, how it exercises those powers, and that it has its exercising powers just like any other empowered body, corporate or person in this country, to acquire property through the normal purchase and sale process, through the normal process of putting a willing buyer and a willing seller together without any threat of compulsory acquisition or anything. It has no greater leverage than any other potential buyer, but it has the justification of pursuing the objectives which the Trust was given by the legislature, by the people who sat around the table and thought these were the kinds of powers that this Trust should have in order to help do a better job than what governments around the world have typically done in protecting natural environments, in protecting matters of culture, in protecting historically important areas. There are many, many examples of national trusts being set up, and the wheel wasn't reinvented here, Madam Speaker. We have very similar legislation across the overseas territories, and many other Commonwealth countries have similar structures with national trusts performing similar functions and having similar powers. And in fact, looking at some of the overseas territories, Bermuda and the Turks and Caicos and BVI, Anguilla, it's all very similar, even down to the provisions relating to alienability and making things inalienable. I think I have clearly set out why that shouldn't be reflective of a concern or something which is regarded as evil or some kind of boogeyman which overrides the interests of this country. Madam Speaker, one other aspect I'd like to touch on in relation to the member's contribution is that he referred to the offenses under the trust law. I believe it's section 18. And in relation to that, Madam Speaker, he pointed out that the provision says, section 18, a person who takes or attempts to take any wildlife, either flora or fauna, on trust property. B, starts any fire on trust property except in any area where, under the bylaws of the trust, fires are permitted. C, removes any artifact from any trust property. D, defaces any trust property. E, refuses to leave trust property when required to do so by an officer, employee, or agent of the trust under section 17 is guilty of an offense. Now, Madam Speaker, in every one of those provisions, it says the offense relates to activities carried out on trust property. So, if we look back at the definition of trust property, it clearly says trust property means the property held by the trust. That is any property held by the trust, Madam Speaker, not property which is exclusively made inalienable. It is any trust property. Now clearly, the framers, the presenters, the people of this country who were involved in this steering committee, they all, and I believe there was at least about 20 of them, they all became the founding members of the National Trust pursuant to the bill, the law. They all clearly felt that that was an appropriate provision because that is the basis for the National Trust, to protect and preserve property of historical, cultural, and environmental value. But the important thing is it doesn't relate to, it doesn't matter whether property is inalienable, declared as inalienable or not. It is any trust property. So certainly in terms of the motion and the resolution which we are asked to consider, it wouldn't make any difference because the motion asks for the government to consider amending the National Trust Law 2010 revision to provide that the National Trust may only purchase land to be made inalienable after approval of the Legislative Assembly. Madam Speaker, the provisions of the law are very clear in terms of what the purpose was for this. The trust, based on the description of activities, even those that the member has indicated, is exercising powers which it has. It is a complete stretch, Madam Speaker, to suggest, a mile-long stretch, several miles of stretch, to suggest that this is somehow an abuse of power. They're not abusing their power. They're performing the functions for which the National Trust was created, for which it was intended, which the movers of this bill And all members of the House, this Honourable House at the time, Madam Speaker, who supported this bill, either overtly by speaking in favour of it or by voting in favour of it, as the mover of the motion, the member from Northside, did. Madam Speaker, in summary, Madam Speaker, the Trust, far from being an evil empire, far from creating problems, is simply performing the functions that it was intended to perform. It's exercising powers that it has. It is serving the interests of the country. There are in excess of 1,000 members of the Trust. There are many Caymanians, many well-known Caymanian families that have been involved, both now and in the nearly 30 years that this organization has existed, who have been involved. So it's difficult, Madam Speaker, to understand where this great offense is, where the great sin is that it is alleged to be committing. And this is why the government feel that we are not in a position to accede to the motion, to accept the motion, because the motion doesn't really serve the purposes that the member seems to suggest that it does. Why does the National Trust, put another way, why does the Legislative Assembly need to decide what land which the National Trust owns is made inalienable? Why does the Legislative Assembly require to be involved in a decision about what land the Trust decides it won't or doesn't intend to sell, subject to this higher standard, which is required to be met in order to reverse that, in order for the Trust to sell it? And that higher standard is, of course, the 2/3 majority of all members of the Trust, subject to the condition that it is in furtherance of the purposes of the Trust. So we don't see why this should be accepted. We don't see that the motion as framed achieves what the member is trying to achieve, and we don't see the harm, we don't see the offense that is being committed in relation to this. I have outlined, Madam Speaker, I think very clearly that the Trust is not some super body that exceeds the powers of everyone else that owns land in the Cayman Islands, and somehow the government is powerless to exercise interest in the national good, in the public good, for roads or for some other purpose which represents public interest. The Trust is subject to that, as every other organization, every other individual, Madam Speaker. And with that, Madam Speaker, I think I've outlined on behalf of the government why the government doesn't see the need and don't feel that we're in a position to accept this motion. The recitals are somewhat inaccurate, if not completely inaccurate. The representations that have been made as to the justification for the resolution are somewhat dubious and are questionable, and the resolution itself seems to want to achieve something which it doesn't do, but the purpose that it's apparently trying to achieve and fulfill isn't, in our view, a justifiable one. So with that, Madam Speaker, I will say thank you very much and take my seat.
Does any other member wish to speak? Does any other member wish to speak? Final call. Does any other member from Easton?
Madam Speaker, I am not going to be very long, but I will leave the member from Northside who brought this motion to respond to the government lack of acceptance. However, I think it's necessary that I make a few points. Madam Speaker, I have said on more than one occasion that I understand that I am no tree hugger, but I understand that extinction is forever. I understand what that means, Madam Speaker. But certainly, I believe that in the Minister's explanation of how the National Trust has the right to purchase property and the likes, there are certain times when we have to ensure that in the interest of this country, certain things must be done. And whilst the National Trust has its value, we need to somehow not allow the right of use of lands in this country to fall outside this legislature, how it's going to be used, even if it's in the hands of the National Trust. Much of the land that the National Trust has does not fall in the category of sensitive lands. Madam Speaker, I have seen that on more than one occasion. If this land was acquired on that basis, there may be some merit Um, they the National Conservation Law cannot even now get properties other than government properties, cannot prevent development and the likes. The same law that we just passed. And Madam Speaker, that in itself speaks volumes in that even if it's a sensitive property, they have to try and purchase that property. But if it is refused, they cannot acquire it under the land acquisition law. Now, from the owners. Now, Madam Speaker, I know we'll soon have amendments back for that one too. But I have taken note that whilst in the last administration of PPM, we gave the National Trust almost 300 acres up on the Wilderness Road for the Parrot Reserve. That's not recorded as their land though. You know where it is. You got plenty of land there too. They come in for yours next. You got plenty of land there. You got about 40 acres there. I know. I know everything but East End. I wonder where you got to develop on that. Madam Speaker, upon your appointment to Cabinet in 2009, you solicited my help to reroute the East-West Arterial around that said piece of property. And I believe we successfully did that. And it's now demarcated somewhat around it. It was merely touching the fringes of it. It would have taken off probably about 5 acres or something like that off it. Now, Madam Speaker, we know, or most of us around here know, that iguanas in that area was never a part of the history of East End. We are creating new habitats for iguanas. The blue one, yeah. But the reason is that that's where they used to roam before, and that's not true. Nobody from Gambia has ever seen the iguana in there. Okay? They used to be up on Battle Cliff. And don't ask me why they call it Battle Cliff. We'll explain that later. Madam Speaker, likewise, I don't believe any iguanas has ever traversed the Salinas. The Salinas have been, by and large, undevelopable, right in the middle of the country, East End. And that's the same Salinas that the Georgetowners made millions and millions and millions off of when they extracted all of the commercial value out of their salinas in Georgetown and put up all their buildings. What was it Eagle say about that? Put up a bunch of ugly boxes. And people bought them. Madam Speaker, prior to my becoming a minister, Gilbert McLean was the minister. And in a stroke of genius, he gazetted the East-West Arterial right in the middle of a campaign in 2009. When the frenzy was going on, Gilbert was working in the interests of the people of this country, and particularly the people of East End and North Side. And mere days before the election, I think the election was the Wednesday, and that was gazetted the Monday prior to that election. Right in the middle of the frenzy, Gilbert got this thing gazetted. And no one noticed that it was being gazetted. That's why I call it a stroke of genius. And Madam Speaker, it comes in close proximity to the salinas. Now, what the architects of that road did was went straight on the boundary of the private properties and then the salinas. Now, the salinas, a couple hundred acres. Madam Speaker, the only reason the salinas were left there was because it's not arable land. And then it was given to the National Trust. That must have been one of the first pieces that was given to the National Trust, the salinas. I know they are hell-bent on rerouting that road. Madam Speaker, I must tell you, I can't support that. I cannot support that. And I see the minister looking, and Madam Speaker, the reason I can't support it is because first of all, Madam Speaker, if you ask all of those on this National Trust, they own these salinas, and not one has ever been to the salinas. So they don't understand what they have. But of course, they see the road going on its boundary, and immediately they object to it. Now let me explain what it is, Madam Speaker. Why the boundary is where it's at. The salina, being oval shaped right in the middle between East End and North Side, it is shallow rock with salina on it. Madam Speaker, what the people of East End did was they claimed the arable land up to the swamp, Black Mangrove Swamp. They didn't go into the swamp, very little, maybe a couple hundred feet. Where the salina is then that much further. You have to go probably, I don't know, Madam Speaker, maybe a quarter mile before you get into the salina. So it's arable land, beautiful land, just like all the land in East End, which we are dependent upon to have produce. Now, if we were to shift that road out of the Salina, off that boundary of the Salina, we're going to destroy much of the arable land that is left for farming, the expansions for farming. So I'm not going to support the relocation of that road. So it's all the properties, the arable land. Well, most of all it was used for cattle rearing, really. And then you get to swamp, black mangrove swamp. You know what that is, black mangrove? Not mangrove, mangrove. Black mangrove swamp, and then you get into balsam. I know we all know what balsam is. The people that write these papers don't know what balsam is, though, because they're not Caymanians. That'll be another headline, but there's going to be plenty of headlines this week. Trust me. So, Madam Speaker, I have been through that place maybe 3 times in my lifetime, because it takes so long to traverse that swamp and that balsam to get to the Salinas. So actually, the road is not impressed on the map. Where it's impressed, it's not into the Salina. And Madam Speaker, the Premier can attest to that. He has been there. His father dragged him up through that bush too. So, because they don't know and they see on the map the proximity, it looks fairly close to the Salina, and it's on the edge of the property of the Salina, they want to relocate it. There's no need to relocate it, because what is going to happen, then we're going to destroy the private lands. And right now it's taken probably about 8 feet off, 4 to 5 feet or something like that. It's 125 feet wide. So it's taken some of the private property as well as some of what appeared to be the Salina, but really it's the swamp. It's that black mangrove swamp. So I have some concerns with that, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the minister spoke of the Botanic Park, and quite passionately he spoke about the Botanic Park. And I think it's commendable that he can now come up and speak so passionately about the Botanic Park. But obviously he doesn't know the origin of the Botanic Park. But let me enlighten him. Madam Speaker, when the people from Jamaica, Matalans, had leased the property from government and they would go on to develop it, safe haven, one of the conditions placed upon them by the authority was that they would provide storm belt elsewhere. Now, the Minister for Works and I were on planning immediately following the approval of that development. And when Mr. Kirkland Nixon, who was in charge of the National Trust, came to us to try to convince us to give them all of the public open space around the country so they could sell it so they could buy this piece of land that had become available because they wanted to do a botanic park. At the time, it was Mr. Miller was in government. Mr. Benson, Mr. Norman, and the Honorable Linford Pearson. Madam Speaker, the Minister for Works and I picked up on it immediately, and we said, why don't we bring Matalon in and get him to purchase that? Because we have control over the storm belt anyway. So what's the use of buying it back when the planning department and the government can control the storm belt and say you can't remove it. So Mr. Matalon came in and he was elated because he couldn't find any storm belt. Who was going to sell him storm belt along the North Sound? And if this was the exchange, then he was quite happy to go and purchase this piece of property. That is how the Botanic Park came into being under Mr. Kirkland Nixon. It wasn't a special spot. It was just that Kirker felt like he could work and throw hole and do what he had to do up there to make it into a botanic park. There wasn't anything sensitive about the properties. It's just that these people were selling it. And for the purposes of this exercise, I think I should let the minister know that the Botanic Park is in East End, if you didn't know that. So there is much already owned by the National Trust in the district of East End too. The Botanic Park is in East End. I guess we'll figure out the geometry on that. You go north side to get to East End. Madam Speaker, I support the National Trust, but certainly there are things that we need to ensure we have the right and reserve the full authority over some of these things. Such as if I'm minister, if I'm the representative for the people of East End, I could go down kicking and screaming about realigning that road because it's going to destroy all our people's land. Just for a matter of less than a couple hundred feet, 125 feet I think it is, that has been gazetted there. It will not disturb the Salinas. I promise you, it will not. Madam Speaker, there are many, and I agree with the minister. If you don't get a willing seller, a willing buyer can't achieve his objective. I understand that. But he did say that what makes East End North Side extremely attractive just happens to be that the people of East End and North Side preserved it. And that's true. I have said that too. That's what that Minister for the Environment is trying to chase. He's chasing an elusive dream. Because we are telling him no, in that land, they got their drones up there now, taking pictures. But because since this country was discovered, we have preserved it, I have confidence that the people of East End can continue to do so. And we have beautiful lands there. I have invited that minister, Madam Speaker, on more than one occasion to come to East End with me so he can get an appreciation, not only for the beauty of that terrain, but also an appreciation of how the people view this land. You're not going to see subdivisions and all that inside there. Trust me. But the minister won't come. I don't know if he's afraid he needs helicopter to bring him up there or what. I have offered to use my truck to take him in there, and he just won't come. And I really want to take him there so he can understand and talk to some of the people so they can understand why they did what they did and why they want to go on doing what they did, because it saved their properties and they passed it on from one generation to the next. And Madam Speaker, I won't tell you in many generations past you and I that something else won't transpire up there. I would never do that because I can't speak for them. But in the foreseeable future, I don't think we're going to get to the point where anything up there is wantonly destroyed. I am positive of that. But I still want the minister to go with me so he can see. And then he can see where this country and why this country will never fail when it comes to feeding its people because of that same arable land that we have. And that's all we have left in the country. Madam Speaker, I understand you gravitate to where your needs will be fulfilled, which is to preserve something and create your own little icon and create your own little castles in the sky and look for your longevity in whatever you have created. But I mean, I think that we need to be extremely careful how we try to foist that attitude on people who have it, such as East and North Side. Because they too think of what Georgetown used to be. And Madam Speaker, I left the forest for them, you know. I didn't cut through the forest again, you remember that? I wonder why that isn't being bought in Georgetown. Has it been offered to the National Trust? Has the National Trust tried to buy it? They work hard to stop me. That is, if they don't buy it, I think that under the law, the National Conservation Law, then I believe somebody needs to approach those rich people up there to buy their property. Because they stopped me from putting the road through in the interest of the country. So I think it's, Madam Speaker, it would be in the interest of this country for us to acquire that property in the middle of Georgetown. Because I understand we only got 3/4 acre they own down here. The National Trust. The National Trust. If that's what we're going to do, we need to go at those people who have this property and try and buy it from them as well. Don't just go at the people who we know maybe in their evening of life and they're somewhat desperate because of the economy in this country to have a few more dollars and they will agree much more easily. we also have a responsibility to preserve in Georgetown. What, you know, Madam Speaker, we allow everybody to come, seeking a place to stand or a place to hide. And we allow them to gather right around here in Georgetown, and we don't try to stop them. And all of a sudden then we spread it out and try to stop all those others who have preserved this. So we made our mistakes in Georgetown. There are a few places left that we can still stop, put a freeze on it. But, you know, we have already allowed someone to buy it up, so they're not gonna sell. So we gotta go rush, find it elsewhere, you know. I mean, Madam Speaker, a classic example is, they say that the silver touch is close to extinction. Say what? Madam Speaker, I don't think that people totally understand how the people of East End and Northside idolize those trees. And they are seriously protected just by the people because of what it means to them. I mean, we don't mean directly to that person, but indirectly, some of their families still doing little straw work and stuff like that. You put a bulldozer in some of that property up there, and they tell you, do not knock down your detached tree. That's how this conservation works. It's about a heritage and passing it on. That's what it's about. But in Georgetown, everybody has extracted every 1 cent. They squeeze that lime until they drink till their belly full to get lemonade. Now there is nothing left in Georgetown. There are a few little pieces left, but nobody is interested in that because they can have paid too much for it. There is such a thing as compulsory acquisition. So I'm challenging the government, and in particular the minister, to start using the acquisition provision to take a few pieces of these properties in Georgetown so we can preserve for the children of Georgetown too. Why should the children of Georgetown, future children of Georgetown, have to drive to East End, see silver touch when we got a wild orchid right up there along Walker's Road? Stop it. East End children should come to Georgetown to look at that wild orchid. But we're going to make them destroy that. And then we got to transplant it to East End. And then East End will be, and Northside will be fenced off as a great reserve. And then we will receive our 10% or that we look for. Just up there? No, man. That's not fair. I see a couple of places up there by the building on Walker's Road, on Elgin Avenue too. Stop it. A couple of pieces of bulrush left in Georgetown, Madam Speaker. We don't have to go to Salinas to look for it. The children in Georgetown should be able to learn what it's like right there in all that. But no, we want to build the boxes and build them 10 stories high so we can get all of the economic value and get rich overnight. And then we come to, then we go East End, we'll call that paradise, and then as soon as you call that paradise, then that'll be destroyed too. Oh yeah, not today, Bobo. Trust me. Madam Speaker, I just want them to know that those who are hungry for power, they ain't like no neon way up there. Not up in East End. Because there's nothing up there for them to do. we have preserved it as much as we possibly can. So, Madam Speaker, I believe that much has been gained by the National Trust in East End as well, the Botanic Park, the Salinas, the reserves, the Parrot reserves, and the lighthouse. I wonder if the minister knew that that was part of their remit as well. The lighthouse next to the Conley's estate, Warren Conley's house. That's National Trust too. But some old lion tongue grass up in the choking you. So I don't know when we're going to get that cleaned up. But Madam Speaker, like I said, I support the National Trust. I think they have a function in this country. But we need to be careful how far they go. And we need to see that it is not only concentrated on the areas that others have taken care of all the time. We really need to come into Georgetown and along West Bay Beach and use the acquisition law to take away some of this property, to acquire some of this property on behalf of the National Trust, so Georgetown can have some place too. We can't just concentrate it on one end of the island. It's not fair. Our people are not viewing that as being fair to them. And I had hoped that the government would have at least said to the member from Northside that, you know, if you amend this, we would accept it. But you know what? All I can tell you, Madam Speaker, is that how much land I own in East End land? 40, 49, and 8 is what? 57? 57 acres. Part of the 49 is only, so I own once, 1/8, 1/7 or 1/7. 8 acres I own. I will always own 1 square yard, which will be passed on to my children. Sensitive or not, that shall never be bought nor sold. So I think that just step around and go to someplace else. But Madam Speaker, my elite, compared with some of us in here and how much they have, mine is like a fly on the back of an elephant, of no significance. Some of them never planted with, you know, up in East End land. Planted that they can inherit too. You better look out. Because while people can step over mine, they gotta walk through theirs, and they'll notice it. So I thank you, Madam Speaker.
Does any other member wish to speak? Does any other member wish to speak? Final call. Does any other member wish to speak? If not, I'll call on the mover to exercise his right of reply.
All of my years in this assembly, time I come here, I come with 2 books. On any motion that I've ever moved here, I had 2 speeches prepared. One was short, nice, above board. Blame nobody for anything. Never call nobody stupid. Never call nobody can't understand. Never call nobody any of those kind of things. But Madam Speaker, I learned after the first year that I should take the time the night before I come to prepare another speech in case that's the way they want to go. So, Madam Speaker, I took out the other book. Now, Madam Speaker, the minister responding on behalf of government had much to say about what happened while I was here and why I didn't speak on this, and misinformed the House, said I had voted for the bill. Now, Madam Speaker, I have in my hand the vote on the second reading debate on this motion. And the mover called for a division. Can I have a division, Mr. President? Certainly, because we had a governor in charge then. They talk funny. They didn't talk like me. Ayes. Honorable Thomas C. Jefferson, Honorable Richard W. Brown, Honorable J. Lemuel Hurlston, Honorable Benson O. Banks, Honorable Captain Charles L. Colonel, Honorable Vassell G. Johnson, Honorable W. McKeever Bush, Mr. W. McKeever Bush, Mr. Stafford L. Orrit, Mr. Linford Pearson, Captain Mabel S. Colonel, Mr. James M. Borden, Mr. G. Haig Borden. No was blank. You notice I didn't call my name, Madam Speaker? And Madam Speaker, all of us in here know what that means, how that works. But let me remind the country, let me demonstrate the most recent occurrence. Because it just happened. Just happened. Remember Friday? Everybody supported the motion on crime. Every man got up and spoke for it. Monday, everybody supported the motion on immigration. Every member spoke. Today, one member spoke. Because you don't want to get up. I was a supporting backbench member of the government when they brought this bill. I had no desire to get up and criticize my government. So that's why they never spoke. I was outside when the vote was called because I didn't want to vote against my government. That didn't mean it, but I didn't debate it. There is no record in the Hansard of me speaking on the second debate of the motion. And Madam Speaker, I really don't have a reputation of coming down here, right, and not speaking on things that I want to speak on or support of. And Madam Speaker, so let's put that to rest. He made a big deal of my speech when the member for Bordentown and the two members of Bordentown tried to recommit it. And I'm proud of what I said then, Madam Speaker. Make no apologies for it. Because, Madam Speaker, we had gone through, but what, Madam Speaker, lawyers are funny people, And we see this in court every day. Same piece of evidence mean two different things to different lawyers. They use this records to enforce or reinforce their argument. But boy, did they ignore a lot of evidence that goes against their argument. Because, Madam Speaker, we spent much time in committee on the bill. You will see. It's recorded in the Hansard. Because of the concern expressed by the two members from Bordentown about the same purchase land business. because they had the same concerns, and I could quote some of the statements. And Madam Speaker, the minister put this out here that this piece of legislation was accepted in the country as if it was the greatest thing since sliced bread. Madam Speaker, there was much discussion in this country about this national trust being able to morph itself into this evil empire that I think they are now. And before I sit down today, Madam Speaker, I'm going to make some further accusations against them, because I'm beginning to believe that they're bordering on being the drunken evil empire. And I got to prove, I got to demonstrate why. But Madam Speaker, you will notice, but I'm not a lawyer, so I just read the stuff. I didn't say I didn't support national trust. I didn't say I didn't agree that the national trust could buy land. I'm not trying to stop the national trust from buying any land. All I'm saying, Madam Speaker, in my constituency, they're buying too much. And Madam Speaker, since the minister says he wasn't sure about the accuracy of my map, please indulge me, Madam Speaker, but I'll leave that for a little while. The shock and awe is coming next. Borrow something from George W. Bush. Because, Madam Speaker, they're looking over, they're contented. They don't think I have an argument. I can show you why the people, and in particular, the adjoining landowners to this trust property, are so worried in my constituency. But, Madam Speaker, there was much discussion by our national hero, Mr. Jim Borden, about this ability for the National Trust to go out and solicit land and buy land. There was so much discussion about it in the common room the day before the bill was moved that the mover of the bill had to make the kind of statements that the minister quoted him grudgingly, because he didn't want to read that part, Madam Speaker. He only read that because he said I had read it. But there's other sections in here that go the same way. He had to try to pacify the members from Bordentown, because everybody know that Mr. Jim and Mr. Haig were two of the most gifted orators and campaigners ever to come in this house, particularly when it come on criticizing the government. I've been here and I've seen Mr. Jim speak for 4 days. 4 days. That's why we have a limit now of 2 hours, Madam Speaker. Because I moved a motion in Standing Orders Committee to restrict everybody to 1 hour. And we got 2. We got 4 at that time. That's all I could get, 4. And since government says that, I reduced it to 2. But there's a reason why Sir Vassell said quote about Mr. President, one of the areas in looking at legislation which is so important is to assure that the operation of the trust is such that it does not accumulate an abundance of power which would lead to sometime to the challenging the government. And Mr. President, before I comment on the clauses of the bill before us, I would just like to say that prefacing the clauses of the bill, we have the Memorandum of Objects and Reasons. It says that this bill is to create a national trust for the Cayman Islands, its main purpose to preserve the culture, historical, and natural heritage of the islands. It's a number going on by land. Of course, Madam Speaker, the law must provide them to buy land where it is necessary because of the cultural, historical, natural heritage of the islands. Otherwise, I agree with the minister, would be totally ineffective. Madam Trustee went on to say, Mr. President, in subsection 2B, which says the acquisition of any property by gift, bequest, purchase, lease, or other means which would be used by the National Trust. And again, this is to ensure that the power of the trust does not upset people. That's what they're doing in my community, and I'm going to find out why. Now, Madam Speaker, there's a couple of reasons why the National Trust is getting an opportunity to buy this land. And, Madam Speaker, I'm grateful to some of the people who can sell it to them, but here are the reasons why other developers are not buying the land and paying market value for the land. Because, Madam Speaker, most of this land is what we in Northside call estate land. Belonged to my grandfather. It's now owned, as Mr. McLean said, by 4 to 17 people. When they go to the government to subdivide the land, the government tells them you cannot subdivide the land unless you have a 30-foot road. Now, none of this land has 30-foot road. All we have is a 6-foot path. And when you go to the National Trust to ask them to give you an easement, they tell you no. Now, Madam Speaker, we have a gentleman who is investing a lot of time and money in developing some caves on Northside. Handel Whitaker gave him access. Church of God gave him access. He needed to cross a little triangle piece of the National Trust land. That point right there. Point right there. Probably about 25 or 30 feet long, about 30 feet wide. Tell him no, not doing it. We want the caves to buy. The man had to go down in the district of Northside, buy a house and land that is over a mile away from the caves to get access to the caves. This year, 2 months ago, I wrote the National Trust. The landowners in Northside want to put in a farm road, 30-foot farm road. We had to cross this piece of the National Trust land. I went, met with their executive. In the generosity of the landowners, who, Madam Speaker, everyone is giving up 15 feet on either side of the boundary now. And they have written a petition to government saying they will not seek compensation for the land because everybody will benefit. We provided, through private owners, 30-foot road to get to the National Trust land. First thing they tell me, Madam Speaker, no, we're not supporting anything you're doing if you're putting this piece of road here because we don't want no access to our land. I say, well, why not? Oh, well, in the negotiations we got with the government, it's this arterial way, they're giving us access over that highway and they're going to build us a house and all kinds of things. Oh, well, are you providing an access to your land to get to these landowners? Oh, no. So I said, okay. So we wrote them and asked them to give 15 feet off of the edge of the boundary for their land. Here is the reply. dated May the 30th. Thank you for meeting with us this week in relation to your request for your consent to an easement over the above listed property. In order to present your request to the Trust Council, would you kindly send me the letter of request you mentioned you would provide? 30th of May. Hello, Mrs. McTaggart Pineda. Attached, please find a letter and copy of the petition as promised. I apologize for the delay as I was busy in the Legislative Assembly. 11th of June. Repetition to government to gazette proposed farm roads. Further to your letter received on the 30th of May 2014, the National Trust Council has now reviewed your request in relation to the above matter. The Council has agreed that should the Cayman Islands government decide to gazette the road you are proposing, the National Trust will work with the government as needed. Until such time, the Trust would be grateful if you would remove as a matter of urgency its name from the petition being circulated, as it will not be participating in the petition. Now understand, Madam Speaker, National Trust don't have no access to this land. They're trespassing on my family land to get there. They don't even have a 6-foot path to it. Here we are, 20 landowners giving up 15 foot of road each to provide them vehicular access to their property. And this is what I write and tell the people up there. Because they know. You heard the minister say they got 1,000 members. I don't know. They go to the government got keel over, like they did on the east-west arterial way. And the government can take the land from the private landowner. Because all they go tell the private landowner that he'll pay for the 30 feet. They'll pay for the extra 15 feet. Because, Madam Speaker, the minister said that the negotiations on the east-west arterial way was easy. It was agreed by all parties. Speaker, understand that they have increased the cost of that road to pacify the National Trust by several $1 million, because they've increased the length of the road. And the minister from Eastern, member for Eastern, can tell you that that up through there is a couple $1 million a mile, right? Okay. They have taken it off a land that the trust holds for the people, which they shouldn't have to pay for, because it was already there when the road was gazetted. So they know the road was gazetted when they bought the land. Moved it on to private land, which the government can know how to pay for. But National Trust don't have no power. And you see, Madam Speaker, this is how they insult, they intimidate the landowners in my constituency with this kind of correspondence. Refuse to support us to get the road, tell us to take it off as a matter of urgency, because they will not be supporting the petition. You know why, Madam Speaker? Because that's how they keep the price of the land down. Because when the owners of this estate land in Northside can't get permission from government to subdivide it amongst its family members, and Madam Speaker, the Minister of Planning and I have agreed that we're going to correct that in these planning law he's bringing it out. And if you don't bring it, I got to file an amendment. Because people, particularly people in the eastern districts, should be able to reparcel land, to pass it on to their children without having to have a 30-foot road, because they're not developing the land. No. If one of the parcels want to develop a housing scheme on it of 100 by 100 foot lots. Of course, you should have a 30-foot road. But if my father wants to reparcel a piece of property that he owns into 4 parcels for his 4 children, there's no need to have a 30-foot road. But the government and the National Trust do that. And you see, they won't give you no access. They won't even cooperate with you to get access from everybody else. They won't even sign the petition supporting it. And when the people put the land for sale, the real estate people tell them, well, now, you know, it'll be hard to sell this because a developer can't buy it because he can't develop it because you don't have no 30-foot road to it. But maybe we can see if the National Trust will buy it. No, Madam Speaker, many of these people need to sell this land. So, the National Trust agrees to buy it. And Madam Speaker, in the debate of the budget, I mentioned some of these problems you were having with the National Trust. The following week, I happened to be at a social with the former treasurer of the National Trust, and the minister said he has no knowledge of them scheming to buy this land, right? But I have knowledge of it. And the president said to me, he said, Ezra, I heard you say something the other night about the National Trust. Scheming and strategizing to buy this parcel, to landlock that parcel, so the price has to go down. I said, yeah, that's the information. He said, you don't know how right you are. He says, as treasurer, we would sit down around the table and plan to buy these pieces and landlock these other pieces to keep the price down. Now the minister said they get 2 evaluations. Big deal. All the land sold up in there is National Trust selling it. And we know how them evaluations is done. Most of them real estate people value land not on this development potential or any of that, on recent sales in the area. Yeah, right? So they're buying it so they keep the price down. Otherwise, Madam Speaker, how can you possibly explain the National Trust paying $90,000 an acre for a pond in West Bay and buying good, arable farmland in Northside for $3,500? The minister told, the treasurer, the former treasurer told me, he says when Mr. Dart went up there and bought some of the wetlands, how upset the executive of the National Trust was because he was raising the price. Now, Madam Speaker, individually, most of us have no idea the magnitude of what I'm talking about. Not even the people in Northside who sell on the land. So I can show you, Madam Speaker. Indulge me a minute, I'm going to need the help for the elected representatives. Keep going. Keep going. Keep going. Keep going. Keep going. Now, that is the amount of land the National Trust owns in the constituency of Northside. Tell me where the future generations of Northsiders supposed to live. Supposed to grow cassava, all of them, all areas colored as National Trust. When I did this research, I was shocked. When I show this to the people in my constituency at public meetings, they're outraged. And Madam Speaker, you can't tell me that this is not deliberate.
Member, perhaps you could assist the House by pointing out the demarcated boundaries of north side and that owned by the National Trust so that you can put the map in perspective.
This is the boundary going west of the Key. And Madam Speaker, remember that, that all this down through here, not arable land. That's wetlands. Can't do nothing in that. Can't live there, and they're not going to allow you now to develop it. This is the extent of the arable land in our side. This is Frankstown Road. The boundary for East End is right there. Just off the map. No other member sitting in this house can tell me this is reasonable and that this is not a threat to the future generations of Northside. This is the farm road we're trying to put in. We wanted to put it over here because you see it's a lot shorter, right? And it's a lot higher cliff. The landowners figured, well, they could give the rock to the quarter people and get it built free. This is the National Trust piece of land that they refused to give us 15-foot easement over. This is the two pieces of land that all of these people here were willing to give easement so the National Trust would get to it. The first thing they made me in the meeting was erase this portion off it. I did, and trying to negotiate to get this to the people. Yeah. Now the right men tell me that even after I did this, they ain't allowing this. And Madam Speaker, the minister likes to talk about that this is here to preserve the Mastic Trail. Well, the Mastic Trail should be coming in right here. Going in right here. Below breakers. This is in squat quarries. They put it in behind the fire station, down through here, right? Come out here. Now you see how little of their incorrectly demarcated Mastic Trail is over their land. So the minister tells me that they're coming after all this too. Because I know they are. I know they've made offers to people. And I know that it's below market value. I know of instances, Madam Speaker, where family members are trying to buy the land, right? And the National Trust come in and offer more than the family member to get it. And if you think I can't prove that, challenge me. And Madam Speaker, get back to my question. Where are Northsiders supposed to live and grow food in the future? Because I agree with the minister. The inability to pick a mango up in here, not only confined to the inedible land. None of this. We can hunt rabbits on. We can't plant a root of cassava. We can't plant a head of yam. We can't pick a mango. We can't cut a top. We can't cut a piece of mahogany limb to make a table leg. We can't cut a piece of ironwood. Or any other kind of hardwood, because we got different hardwoods up in this ironwood to make a fence post. And Madam Speaker, I know I am becoming public enemy number one, and if I'm not already that. Because I am fool enough, politically, to get up here and challenge these people. Because all of them is saying, but they're preserving the land. What are you complaining about? They are buying the land. They're not stealing it. They're preserving the land. Preserving it for who? Not for us. We preserved it for them all these years. Now, they're slowly taking away our heritage, our cultural practices. And Madam Speaker, this Parliament, this government is comfortable, is prepared to sit down and let this continue to happen. Notice, Madam Speaker, my motion didn't ask the government to take some of this land back and sell it to private people, you know. All I'm saying, we need to slow them down. And the only way I know to slow them down is to force them to bring it here to buy it. Because, Madam Speaker, explain to me why on the map that I gave you can't find what a National Trust owned in Georgetown or West Bay. Are you telling me there was nothing in Georgetown, nothing in West Bay that should have been preserved, that fits under the categories and definitions of the purpose of the National Trust law? Nothing. Madam Speaker, I get back. We're not talking about like Salinas, right? Well, they can help them buy a house too, but they can't pay them up. But they don't have no rushes up on Shed Road. What road they go up to there? Elgin Avenue. You're going to preserve some rushes up along there, right? We're not talking about like the Salinas, where the people don't use the land. Right? Where the people don't need the future generations, my grandchildren and their children. And it's our responsibility to think about these people, you know. I promise you, Madam Speaker, if the National Trust tried to own half of that acreage in Georgetown or West Bay, it'd be a riot and the law would be repealed. But no. It's Northsiders. And anything, and they're represented by that radical Ezra Miller. Right? So we can just ignore what he bring down here and let them continue to do what they do. Oh, I promise them that this is not the end. I have tried to come what I believe is the correct way. And Madam Speaker, I have a smaller version of the map for tabling.
Thank you.
Now, Madam Speaker, the minister made a big deal about the National Trust is functioning so well, and although the law says that they shall have district committees, and they don't have any that I'm aware of, certainly don't have any in my district, and I have no knowledge of them trying to form any, because they're quite happy, Madam Speaker, to run it here in Georgetown, because the law also goes on to say, Madam Speaker, you know, that these heritage sites and sensitive areas must be identified by each district committee in its district. There is no Northside district participation in this. They can't come Northside and have a public meeting about this. But that's what the law says. He said that I shouldn't complain if they don't have a district council Northside, and that shouldn't affect the law and all that kind of stuff, and you know. And Madam Speaker, I'm not going to waste too much more time with the House, but I've got a few other things to say. Now, Madam Speaker, in Compass Thursday, September the 11th, 2014, as much as I hate to quote anything from this newspaper, but this is a paid ad, so I believe it's accurate. This is paid for, and that's how they make the money. National Trust of the Cayman Islands. Notice of annual general meeting of members. Notice is hereby given that the annual general meeting, the meeting, in brackets, of the members of the National Trust of the Cayman Islands, the trust in brackets, will be held on Thursday, December the 25th, 2014 at 6 p.m. at the Bar Crudo below God Harvey's restaurant at 55 South Church Street. And Speaker, you heard me having the National Trust general meeting? You see, when I say that, I believe it now become the drunken evil empire, because this bar has to be open at 6 p.m. by law. one of the terms of their license. And Madam Speaker, something that was intended to be so worthy, so noble, so important to this country, we having the annual general meeting in a bar on South Church Street. Drinking, broken families next to it. As that great orator in here had said about that candidate of his with the sign above it that said, danger! Right? At least they put the compass, put the ad where they could be warned while they were reading it about the problems with drinking and broken families. But this is preserving our heritage. We're having the annual general meeting of this National Trust that the minister and the government is so proud of at a bar. At a bar. Oh, I was proud of it when it started, but I gave up on them 15 years ago for the same kind of thing, you see? When it started, we used to have the annual general meeting at the Town Hall or the United Church Hall. How has it gotten so low?
Member from Easton, you said the 25th?
Yes, ma'am. September the 25th, 2014. I can table it at 6 p.m. at Bar Crudo. Below Guy Harvey's restaurant. And Madam Speaker, there's a couple of other things in this ad, right, that I need to bring to attention to the minister who's so proud of this National Trust and their now activities. And these are the reasons that Diaz and Miller don't associate with them anymore. For the following purposes: to receive the annual report and accounts for the fiscal year ended June the 30th, 2014. And Madam Speaker, getting back to the debate in 1987, what the minister didn't tell you is that the majority of the debate then, because the people who opposed didn't want to produce audited accounts. And we had to force, not me, because I don't took no part in it, because I don't want to embarrass my own government, but we all know how it works. We proved that here between Monday and today on this motion. The member for Borden, two members from Borden Town, and now the now leader of the opposition, had to beat the government into accepting an amendment to audit accounts. But he's talking about the committee that drafted it was so worthy, and oh, you have no idea what was going on. To elect members to the Council of the Trust. What did I say? To elect members to the Council of the Trust in a bar room. To transact such other business as may properly come before the meeting or any adjournment thereof. Dated at Georgetown, Grand Cayman, 11th day of September, 2014. Now, Madam Speaker, you heard the minister boasting about the structure of the council and the officers. A list of nominees as put forward by the nominating committee at today's date is as follows. That's how they kept us out of it 15 years ago, you see. Because they didn't publish it, but they wouldn't allow me to submit somebody to be chairman. But, Madam Speaker, I wonder why they're not electing a vice chairman, secretary, treasurer. Why are they only having elections for chairman? Are those offices to remain unfilled? Because they have, I don't know who this is, because this don't appear in the law. And although the minister is a lawyer, and he tried to lecture me on the correctness of my motion and my whereases and whether it was meaningless and stupid and useless and everything else. There's nothing in the law about electing general council, about a general council member. The law only refers to council member. So I don't know who these general council members and what authority in law. But, Madam Speaker, the key, this domino key, go on both ends. Please note, you must be a current 2014 member of the National Trust for the Cayman Islands and be 18 years of age in order to vote at the AGM. I'll bet you, Madam Speaker, anybody who is not a member because of financial, not pay the membership fee, you got to pay for this now. Now we're getting no letter from the trust inviting them to pay the membership fee and be allowed to vote. When they go there, if they go, they can tell them you're not a member because you didn't pay fee. I ask nobody. That's what I did, my people. They paid their fees that night, and they wouldn't make them vote. So, Madam Speaker, the point I'm trying to make to all honorable members is not because the movers and the framers of this intended this to be a good thing, that it is a good thing at this stage. There is plenty wrong with what's going on in the National Trust. And the government needs to take it in hand, and the government needs to sort it out. The law doesn't say there may be, there might be, there could possibly be district councils. The law says there shall be. The law says that the preservation of heritage, environmental sites, etc. in land in the district must be recommended by that district council. But they're sitting down Georgetown in a boardroom as an executive planning how to get land from Northsiders cheap. And Madam Speaker, I can tell the government. Because, Madam Speaker, you notice when the minister was naming out families that support the National Trust, he never mentioned Millers, he never mentioned McCoys, he never mentioned Connolly's, he never mentioned Chisholm's. None of them people. No mention none of them. They won't land up here. And as Mr. McLean said, I can promise them, that the day they bite our piece, they're joining on now.
North said, please ensure that you're speaking in the mic so the Hansard can correctly record what you say.
Hear me, Madam Speaker. I promise you that that arc you see I'm going to know, the land that they joined out onto, they ain't going to buy. If they buy that, you know Ezra Miller is 6 foot in the Chisholm graveyard, and nobody ain't going there to build no wall, only 48 inches deep. They gotta make sure I'm 6 foot so they can keep me down, right? Because only this government gives contract people to build walls 6 foot and accept it 48 inches deep and tell me, say I'm wrong. So, Madam Speaker, I am going to rise up my people. I had a conversation with somebody Saturday night where trust has approached them. The minister said they don't approach them. Want to buy some estate land. I said, well, do you realize now that when the trust buy that now, and like when you sell it to some private developer now, and you can call him up and he can say, can I get a couple of mangoes? Can I keep my ground there? We do this all about Northside. Plenty of people have ground on my land. Don't charge them for it. If they get £100 a yard, they give me 10 or something like that out of it. Right? The National Trust cannot give you permission to pick a mango under this law. It cannot give you permission to hunt a rabbit. It cannot give you permission to set fire to the grass piece to kill the ticks that are killing your cows. It cannot give you permission to cut down the highland and burn it on top of your cliff to get fertilizer for your yams, and you can plant the yams in a hole. The law prohibits them from doing that. But the government seems comfortable. Well, we're not going to enforce it. Man, they don't have no choice. These people will not even cooperate with the landowners in North Side, all of whom, Madam Speaker, supported the National Trust financially when it was founded and served for years and years and years on their district councils. And you can't give us 15-foot easement over your land because you believe that you're going to be landlocked. Madam Speaker, if I had to mortgage and sell everything I own, I could put up bar wire, 6-strand bar wire there, 8 inches apart. Tell not a National Trust member to walk across my land to get to theirs because they're trespassing. They're trespassing. I had run-in with them a couple years ago. Big out on the radio, leading delegation to the Chisholm graves in Forest Lane. I called up the chairman. I said, that's private property. Stay off it. Oh, but I shouldn't feel. I shouldn't feel that way. This ain't their land, you know. This is the people's land. Now, they can go east end and buy 30, 40 acre piece and build a house in the middle of it. That's nice. That's beautiful living. That's beautiful living. But I can't go up in there now and build a house because I can't get to it. Other persons can't go and live on their land. Not too many mules around, you know. My grandfathers and them grow 50, 60,000 pounds of white yam a year up in there. Every year. And as a boy, we wanted to ride a mule so bad, we walked a mule out with the 2 yam baskets on him just to get a ride him back. We're trying to get a road to it now. And they're doing their best to stop it. Remember I spoke about the man doing the caves? Just let me show you. He could have come across here to get there. They wouldn't make him cross that little triangle, that little corner right there, you know. That little corner right there. He had to go by this house over here. See the road there? Getting caves. But they're preserving my heritage, right? They're protecting it. Thought the man couldn't find an alternative, you see. 5, 6 years from now, they offer him $3,000 an acre. Madam Speaker, it has to stop. I don't know what else we in Northside can do to try to get some sympathy from the government or try to get some sympathy for the members of the National Trust. But, Madam Speaker, land in Cayman is a precious thing. And I want to remind people that the big demonstrations laid against cadastral survey, when they got to Roscoe's and said government owned every square foot of swampland east of that. You remember that, Mr. Anthony? Mr. McLean will remember it too. Some of the young ones, too young. But the people from Northside and East End and Bordentown that came down here and forced the government by closing this town down to say, listen, I'm going to treat swampland in the eastern districts the same way I'm going to treat it West Bay and Georgetown. If you have papers for it, you own it. If you don't have papers for it, we'll give you a provisional title, and if nobody else has claimed it in 12 years, it's yours. But the government of the day intended to claim all this, because it was swampland. Didn't work. Madam Speaker, all of us can create an action. None of us know what the counteraction is going to be, or the consequences of that action is going to be. We have fought the National Trust for the last 20 years and the Department of Environment, trying to take this land away from us. The same people now, Madam Speaker, who enjoyed all of their economic benefits for their families, their inheritance, West Bay, 7 Mile Beach, Georgetown, Savannah, small part of Bordentown. Now that the development is coming that way, we must pay the price for them to salve their consciences because they destroyed what they had in Georgetown for money, for money, for money. And now they want the children to see a thatched tree. So we must pay the economic price now. Madam Speaker, if the National Trust wanted to preserve the Mastic Trail and they wanted to clean the land 100 feet, 300 feet each side of it, I would hazard a guess that every landowner they would give it to them before now. Getting back to the conversation with the gentleman Saturday night. So let me tell you something, noble boy. Oh, he said they can get 2 evaluations, I said, yeah, but those evaluations are going to be based on recent sales. Recent sales in the area, and Madam Speaker, I didn't make this up, the minister who responded on behalf of the government tabled this in Finance Committee. This is prices produced by the government that they paid for the land. August 2004, $3,338 an acre. February the 14th, 2011, $8,757 an acre for good arable land, when a third of an acre on Frankstown Road is $90,000. And you tell me somebody not taking that, is not knowingly taking advantage of these people. Now, Madam Speaker, we have one piece bought 09, where they paid $40,000 an acre. Question is now, who they bought that from? So, in 2009, Mastic Reserve was worth $40,000 an acre. 2011, it only worth $8,500 an acre. When I got access to the land register, go look it up and see who they bought them from. And I said to the guy, I say, they are going to evaluate based on recent sales. And they're going to offer you $3,000-4,000 an acre. He said, you must be mad. Well, leave it alone. But I say, here's my recommendation for you. You tell them what I tell every other person that owns land up in there. Minimum $100,000 an acre. Minimum. I know one family member they went to, Wrong guy. Sent the emissary to him. Oh, you won't buy this piece of land. No problem. What are you offering? I told him, well, we really haven't decided what we're going to offer you yet. Anyway, he told him, he said, well, you tell him that the first offer needs to be $500,000 an acre, and then we can talk about anything. We will negotiate up from that. Well, trust me, he can come back. But, Madam Speaker, this is good, arable, valuable land. This is expensive land. This land has great development potential for the families that own it. And I'm saying here publicly today to the families and the states that own it, do not give it away to the National Trust under some proposal from them that they're going to preserve it for you because you can't get a mango off it. know, Madam Speaker, the minister made a big thing out of the fact that when I say no, that from it had what? Stretch it a mile, I think he said, in order to equate what's happening in our side to abuse. We had some recent announcement about certain things that we had plenty of rules out to, you know. But we know they were abused. At least what's coming out now is indicating that it's abuse. So having the rules to some of these people don't mean anything. They making up their own rules, and that's evidenced by documents they produce. And Madam Speaker, I didn't make any complaints about the offenses under the law. I think they're reasonable offenses for inalienable and trust law, as long as it is confined to small areas and they're really protecting something. Nobody in my constituents would have a problem if this was a 30 or 40 acre site. Nobody. But you can't tell me that it is fair and reasonable to own, according to this document, 500 plus acres in the North Side constituency, 63 acres in Bordentown, half an acre in Georgetown, and 3.6 acres in West Bay. Are you telling me that Georgetown and West Bay don't have no heritage at all? I might agree with you. Right? But I don't believe you.
Other than green.
Money. And Madam Speaker, this is not the first time that we've been victimized, you know. And all along Georgetown and West Bay coastline and the North Sound for Storm Belt, they gave up 300 feet. My constituents, landowners, had to give up 1,000 feet. I have maps in my possession, Madam Speaker, where they have these environmental overzones lay, and they take half of my family land beside it, and they follow the boundary around their land. Don't take a square inch from them. But took 30 acres from me. And they tell me that this is all being done scientifically now. Scientifically. The marine parks were scientifically laid out, the environmental zone. When CUC wanted to put the cable in, they went up that one door and pick up the markers and move them a couple thousand feet to the east. Scientifically, of course. They had GPS and fish counters and all that kind of stuff. Madam Speaker, the point I'm trying to impress on the government is that this is unnecessary. This is unreasonable. This is unsustainable. The people in my constituency won't need a place to live. So unless the government would have accepted my motion and says that any land they're going to buy and make an illegal, and Madam Speaker, I want to ask the minister, what is the purpose of the National Trust buying land if they're not going to make it inalienable? What's the purpose? We had landowners here, Madam Speaker. Get up now. No, I don't need that. I'll be that long. Who in cadastral survey couldn't produce the papers for the land. And the government of the day illegally gave it to the National Trust. And years later, when one of the family members died and they were cleaning up his house, they found the papers done by the British Consul in Panama. And I took the family to the National Trust, begged them to give it back to them. Absolutely refused, because they had mailed it inalienable, and they didn't have the time to go and get their 2/3 membership to do it. Well, he didn't even know it required, the chairman at that time and speaking to us, didn't even know that they could do it. According to him, it couldn't be done. I said, well, sir, there's a section of the law that says you can do it. I had to show it to him. Ain't chairman now, you know. Now read the law. And, Madam Speaker, the history of this is not all good. Their continued attempts to expand their kingdom, right, is troubling, Madam Speaker. And in addition to this, I've already had several discussions with the Minister of Planning. The government needs to correct, whether it's the planning law or the land register law, to allow reparceling of land. Because right now, the only people who have any interest in buying any of this land is the National Trust, because they have no interest in developing it. And if a developer tries to buy peace, the National Trust refuses to give them an easement over it. At no destruction to their land, you know. And Madam Speaker, that is the unreasonableness of this whole thing. Madam Speaker, I thank you in the time of the House.
The question is that be it therefore resolved that the government consider amending the National Trust Law 2010 revision to provide that the National Trust may only purchase land to be made inalienable after approval of this legislative assembly, and that such inalienable land shall only be alienated by the legislative assembly. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, no.
No.
I believe the noes have it.
Madam Speaker, can I have a division, please?
Certainly. Madam Clerk, please call a division.
Honorable Alden McLaughlin.
No.
Honorable Moses Colonel.
No.
Honorable Kurt Tibbetts. Honorable Osborne Broughton.
No.
Honorable Wayne Panton.
No.
Honorable Marco Archer.
No. No. No.
Honorable Tara Rivers.
No.
Honorable Anthony Eden.
Madam Speaker, after listening to Evangelist Miller, I say yes.
Mr. Winston Connolly. Mr. Roy McTaggart.
No. No.
Mr. Joseph Hugh.
No.
Mr. Alva Saku. Honorable McKeever Bush. Mr. Barney Bush.
Yes.
Captain Eugene Ebanks. Mr. Ezra Miller.
Aye.
Mr. Ard McLean.
Yes.
The results of the divisions are as follows: 4 ayes, 8 noes, and 5 absentees. Accordingly, the motion has failed. I recognize the Honourable Premier for the suspension of Standing Order 10-2 if the House is going to continue its work.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I move the suspension of Standing Order 10-2 in order that the business of the House may continue beyond the hour of interruption.
The question is that Standing Order 10-2 be suspended to allow the House to continue beyond the hour of interruption. All those in favor, please say aye. Those against, no. The ayes have it. Accordingly, Standing Order 10-2 is hereby suspended. If we could move to the next item of business.
Private member motion number 8 of 2014-2015, review of the Cayman Islands Constitution Order 2009 to be moved by the elected member for Northside and seconded by the elected member for East End.
I recognize the member from Northside.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I beg to move private members motion number 8, motion in the Cayman Islands Constitution Order 2009. Whereas the Cayman Islands Constitution Order 2009 has now been in operation for nearly 5 years, and whereas there are some concerns and practical operational procedures in certain sections of the Constitution, be it therefore resolved that the government establish a select committee of all members of this Honorable House to review the Cayman Islands Constitution Order 2009 with a view to complete said review within this financial year to allow the necessary referendum to approve or reject the proposed changes in November 2015.
Is there a seconder?
Madam Speaker, I beg to second the motion.
The motion has been duly moved. Is now open for debate. Does the honourable member from Northside wish to speak to his motion?
Just very briefly, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, as the motion says, the Constitution Order is now November the 6th will be 5 years. And I believe that certain concerns and practical operation with the Constitution have turned up over that 5-year period. So I'm recommending that the House appoint a select committee of the whole House to look at it. And if nothing else, Madam Speaker, we would all be familiar with the Constitution after the exercise if we went through it clause by clause. Madam Speaker, just to mention some of the areas that I believe we could improve the Constitution. I believe we could properly set up the appointment of councillors or junior ministers, which is now being done, in my view, illegally. We could remove the position of financial secretary because we see that they've fused that position out, so we could take that out. I believe, Madam Speaker, that all of the constitutionally protected positions should have a 5-year maximum appointment period, and I would prefer 3 years and 2 instead of 1 5. I believe, Madam Speaker, that we need to more clearly define who can sit in this assembly, and in my view, that should be only Caymanians born of at least one Caymanian parent. Constitution is not, some people say it doesn't make that clear enough. And Madam Speaker, I believe that the Constitution needs to provide within it some authority for the governor not to have to appoint anyone as premier or a cabinet minister or a leader of the opposition who happens to be under police bail for any criminal activity. Madam Speaker, I believe that we could introduce a recall clause where members who are not serving their constituency could be recalled. But Madam Speaker, I believe that it would benefit all members. The Constitutional Commission has just issued a very good document explaining the Constitution. And I think all members should make sure they read that. I've read it over the last 2-3 days, and it is very, very good. And it covers a lot of the areas that there may be some confusion over. And I was going to give mine to the school, but in the letter that they wrote me, they say they were going to provide copies in all the schools and libraries, I think. And I think it's a really well done document. And I've had some conversations with the chairman, and I believe that the constitutional commissioners could be invited as one of the stakeholders in this select committee to make any proposed changes that they think are necessary, and all of us members would be able to get a clear understanding through discussion and questions and answers with them of why they think changes need to be made, so that when it comes to the floor of this House, there could be a bipartisan position. And the reason I'm recommending we do it now is because it gives us time to complete it, because every other time we've tried to amend the Constitution, it always gets caught up in the electioneering process, and people no longer look for what's best for the country. They look for where I can get a couple of votes. So, Madam Speaker, I'm simply asking the government to appoint a select committee, which they will have the majority on. I'll just be one vote. They'll have the 10 votes. But I believe we could go through the Constitution, and I think it is time to review it now. It would give us time to put to the public, which the way I read the Constitution, I think we have to do that, and I don't disagree with that. Any changes in November 2015 that committee might propose, and it could be brought in well in advance of the 2017 election, so it doesn't become a political put-forth. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Does another member wish to speak or recognize the Honorable Premier?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, Section 118 of the Constitution establishes a Constitution Commission, which is charged with the responsibility of dealing with constitutional matters. Such a constitution was appointed. The chairman is currently Mr. David Rich. Section 118 provides, Madam Speaker, that the functions of the Constitutional Commission shall be A, to advise the government on questions concerning constitutional status and development in the Cayman Islands, B, to publish reports, discussion papers, information papers, and other documents on constitutional matters affecting the Cayman Islands, C, to promote understanding and awareness of this Constitution and its values, and to exercise such other functions as may be prescribed by a law enacted by the legislature. In the exercise of the functions, the Constitutional Commission and its members shall not be subject to the direction or control of any other person or authority. So, Madam Speaker, this Constitution Commission, as I said, has been appointed. It has been active over the course of the last year or so. It has been reviewing the Constitution, and I am advised by the chairman that by the end of this month, the commission will submit a report to Her Excellency the Governor, and I presume to myself, with the recommendations for changes to the Constitution. And so, Madam Speaker, the government does not feel that now is the time for us to establish a select committee to review the Constitution. Once that report has been received, it will be circulated broadly, and I am hopeful, Madam Speaker, that we can reach some agreement about the changes that are proposed. Madam Speaker, I think I should apprise the House of, or to remind the House of the proposal that was made to the United Kingdom government at the time that the new constitution was actually being negotiated, and the consequences of that proposal. It's outlined in a letter to the then leader of government business, Honorable W. McKeever Bush, on the 10th of June 2009. That is about a month after the general elections which changed the government. A letter written by Chris Brandt, who was then the Parliamentary Under Secretary of State for the Foreign Commonwealth Office. And he wrote, Madam Speaker, Dear Mr. Bush, as part of the constitutional modernization process, the Cayman Islands government made the following proposal, quote, after the present modernization process has been completed, further changes to the Constitution should not be made without the authorization of a referendum, unless the change is declared by the Premier and the Leader of the Opposition to be minor or uncontroversial, in which case a resolution of Parliament would be sufficient. The UK government should be invited to agree that it would honor this referendum requirement, unquote. So that was a proposal that was made by the government during the negotiations about the Constitution. What Mr. Bryant said about that, though, is this. and I revert to the letter. In general, the United Kingdom government approves the idea that substantial constitutional changes should be supported by the people of the Cayman Islands in a referendum. Accordingly, the United Kingdom government would normally use its best endeavors to honor this referendum requirement. However, there may be exceptional circumstances where it would not be possible or appropriate to do so, and for that reason, the United Kingdom government must reserve its position on this matter. And so, Madam Speaker, the current situation, as best we understand it, is that changes which are regarded as minor or uncontroversial or not substantial are possible without the need for a referendum. And indeed, there may be other exceptional circumstances which the UK determines warrant constitutional change without a referendum. My understanding from my discussions with the chairman of the Constitutional Commission and the correspondence that we received is that they have developed identified more than 40 proposed or areas for proposed change, and that they do not regard those proposals as being controversial or substantial. They are mainly matters to increase the clarity of the proposals, of the provisions. It will require, though, Madam Speaker, I think some significant cooperation and agreement on the part of myself on behalf of the government and the leader of the opposition on behalf of the opposition about these changes and or a resolution of the House. If we can do that, those changes could be effected, I think, quite swiftly and easily without the need for a referendum. What I wish to propose to the mover of the motion and the seconder, and indeed all members on the other side, is that once we have this report, we can have a look at it, and if members feel that there are other changes which can fall into either minor, uncontroversial, or not substantial, that those can be fed into the process, and that perhaps we can have a list of proposed changes which we can agree upon, and the House can approve that. And I believe that the United Kingdom government, well, subject to obviously to them agreeing to the changes, would proceed to amend our constitutional order to give effect to those changes. None of these changes would have the effect of changing the balance of power constitutionally between the United Kingdom government and the Cayman Islands government, and none of the changes would make any significant modification to the present constitutional construct. Those kinds of changes would need to go to referendum. So what I would hope I can persuade the mover of the motion and his seconder is that we should not go down this road at this point. Let's wait on the report, which I expect by the end of the month, and see whether we can develop a laundry list ourselves based on that of changes that we can agree upon. I should say, just so that no one is laboring on any misconception, that this government will not initiate a referendum with respect to constitutional change during this term. So we are not proposing to go down the road of any changes which would be considered significant. I have been, and many on the side have been involved in the referendum process. We know how much effort it takes. We know what a huge distraction it is, and it is not something that the government is prepared to entertain during this term. So we are hopeful that these constitutional changes that are being proposed will be of a nature that we can agree on them in this House as being minor, uncontroversial, or not substantial, and that we can go through the cleanup exercise which we all agree is necessary with respect to the current Constitution without winding up in a major national debate and controversy which lasts another year or two and results in a highly polarized referendum. Having been through two referenda in my time here, I understand there's no such thing as a simple referendum. So we are not planning, Madam Speaker, to embark on that particular process. I hope what I've said has been helpful and that it will meet with the approval of the mover of the motion, and that we can agree to take this forward once we get the report of the Constitutional Commission. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Does any other member wish to speak? Does any other member wish to speak? Final call. Does any other member wish to speak? I'll call on the member from the District of Northside for his reply.
Madam Speaker, given the explanation of the Honourable Premier, I will have no difficulty in withdrawing a motion at this time. I would only express one concern. If recommendations come from the Constitutional Commission that are important to the improved good governance of the country, I wouldn't want us to simply eliminate it because a referendum might be necessary and just not move forward on it because it might be a little difficult to do. Because I believe, Madam Speaker, that there are some changes that need to be made to the Constitution to improve the governance structure of the Constitution. But, Madam Speaker, with the leave of the House, I will have no problem, given the Premier's explanation, to withdraw the motion at this time.
The question is that motion 8, 2014, 2015 be withdrawn? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, no. The ayes have it. Accordingly, motion 8, 2014, 2015 is hereby withdrawn.
Private member motion number 9 of 2014-15, amendment to the Penal Code Law 2013 revision, to be moved the elected member for Northside and seconded by the elected member for East End.
Member from Northside, an appropriate motion for this chaotic time.
Madam Speaker, I beg to move private member's motion number 9, amendment to the Penal Code Law 2013, crime, 3 strikes and you're out. Whereas the Cayman Islands are experiencing increasing crime, particularly in offenses of robbery and burglary, and whereas in some districts these crimes are being committed by repeat offenders, and whereas there have been instances where stolen goods have been found by the police and owners at pawn shops, be it therefore resolved that government consider amendments to the Penal Code Law 2013 revision to provide a system that mandates custodial sentences for up to 10 years for either robbery or burglary on the 3rd offense, and to provide similar sentences for those who have more than 3 offenses on their next offense. And be it further resolved that government considers introducing legislation to regulate pawn shops and other businesses that may accept stolen goods, with severe penalties for handling stolen goods, including closing of the business on the 3rd offense.
Is there a seconder?
Madam Speaker, I beg to second the motion.
The motion has been duly moved and is now open for debate. Does the honourable member from the District of Northside wish to explain his reasons for the motion?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I won't bother to rehash the statistics that were presented by the 6th elected member for Georgetown, because I have similar statistics on robbery and burglary. And Madam Speaker, I'm not proposing that this 3 strikes and you're out is the panacea for all crime, particularly robbery. But Madam Speaker, I believe it is one more step in the right direction. I have received representation from Youth Act, Education, Empowerment, Success. And Madam Speaker, I don't really have a lot of time for people who have to belittle what other people are doing in order to justify what they are doing. And Madam Speaker, I can only speak from my experiences in my own district. And everybody in my district knows who the 4 or 5 people that does the robberies are. And when they're incarcerated, we don't have any problem. But for some strange reason, Madam Speaker, in recent times, there seems to be a lot of leniency in the court system, and even though people like myself write letters to the Chief of Police offering to advocate on behalf of the victims before the judges, or at least to the DPP, that because as I understand the penal code, there are 2 levels of offenses. One where you can get up to a year, and the category B or A, might not have the order correct, where you can get a longer custodial sentences. And there seems to be a lot of reluctance on behalf of the DPP to up the level of these repeat burglaries. And Madam Speaker, I believe that some of these people know that they already have 11 offenses, because I would probably guess that the person that the 6th elected member said had 41 offenses and got community service was from my district, because we had a similar offense where we repeat, and a judge gives him community service to do. And we've even had, Madam Speaker, that one of these have been someone for jury duty, one of these repeat offenders. I'm not sure how that happens, or whether if it's a random thing, whether any test is applied after the random selection to eliminate people or not. But if it isn't, maybe we need to look at doing something about that. But equally so, Madam Speaker, in recent times, it has increased because, Madam Speaker, I believe that these pawn shops provide a quick and ready cash sales for these stolen goods. And that's why I have included them in this motion, because my grandmother used to tell me receiver just as bad as thief. And these people are obviously receiving stolen goods, because I took the time to send an FOI to the police, Madam Speaker, and I have a list of stuff which I will table so members can see. And it's a lot of stuff, Madam Speaker. It's 2 pages. Between August and September, they recovered 21 TVs from various burglaries at this particular pawn shop. And they're still operating. October, they had a guitar, a MacBook, boat propeller, iPad with gray case. That's the 31st of October. 19th of October, 2010, 2 gold bracelets, gold rings, gold Harry Winston watch, bracelet, 2 gold rings, 2 pieces of gold watch band, 1 8 sprang bracelet, gold ring and gold watch. November 2011, the report concerns a report of theft where the FedEx employee was interfering with packages of scrap gold being sent to the States for smelting. On at least 7 occasions, they smelted it before the police got there. Tools, August 2011. Tools, August 2011. May 2011, tools. August 2013, Nikon DS100 digital camera. 19th of March 2013, complete sub boy running from house, ring stolen, recovered from the seam shop. Yellow gold chunker chain link bracelet, yellow gold ring with wine and flower design and platinum encrusted with approximately 8 small diamonds, rose gold wedding band, yellow gold ring with 4 half-carat diamonds in a straight row mounted on the strand of prongs, Harry Winston yellow gold ring, diamond half-carat solitaire in a square one. So, Madam Speaker, I also know that one of my constituents had some of her jewelry stolen, and she went to the store and found it, and it was something like between $4,500 and $5,000 worth of jewelry that they had bought from the thief for $50 and had it out now to be sold. So, Madam Speaker, I think it is time. There's evidence that this is happening. And all I just named, Madam Speaker, is from one store. One store. Because that's what my FOI requested. I would assume that there are other fencing operations in the island, but this one, to me, is alarming enough to have us put in the penal code that the third time the police search your premises at a pawn shop and find stolen goods, your business license should be canceled, and you should spend some time in Northward too, along with the thief. So, Madam Speaker, I ask the government to support the motion.
Does any other member wish to speak? Does any other member wish to speak? Final call. Does any other member wish to speak? I recognize the Honorable Deputy Premier.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the government is cognizant of the points that the member has brought out. The resolve section that the government consider amendments to the Penal Code Law 2013 revision to provide a system that mandates custodial sentences of up to 10 years. Madam Speaker, the government is in a position to consider this. Also, Madam Speaker, I thought the member from North Side did a very good job in the way he explained his resolve on the pawn shop issue. I don't think that it's a demand on the government to go through and repeat what he has said, because I think that how he explained it is very easy for all of us to understand. So yes, Madam Speaker, we too are agreeing to consider the resolve as well. And Madam Speaker, if the member is not aware, we are also working on some legislation for a secondhand dealer's bill as well, which I think the member will be happy to hear. So, Madam Speaker, with those few words, I would just like to say to this Honourable House and to the members that we are in a position to consider this. Thank you.
Does any other member just wish to speak? The 6th elected member from the District of Georgetown.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I just wanted to rise to say a few words in support of the government considering the private member's motion. Madam Speaker, whilst, as I stated in my contribution to the private member motion brought by myself earlier this week, something has to be done about crime. And Madam Speaker, as I said, and I'll say it again today, that the sentencing is only one half of the solution. Madam Speaker, if we do not take a holistic approach to crime and consider and pay the same attention and put the same amount of effort and money towards early intervention, preventative programs, and rehabilitation as we do to sentencing and housing of prisoners, then we are going to continue in a perpetual circle. The mere criminalization of certain behaviors, Madam Speaker, serves as a deterrent to most of us in society. But Madam Speaker, the question is, what do we do with those individuals who, for one reason or the other, have no fear of the deterrent set by sentencing guidelines, which just from the fear of losing their freedom or the understanding of losing their freedom, which most of us hold dear to us, will not dissuade them from criminality. Madam Speaker, those persons must and have to be rehabilitated. The issue of crime and punishment, Madam Speaker, has as much to do with the Honorable Minister of Finance, as much to do with the Honorable Minister of Health, as much to do with the Honorable Minister of Tourism, as it does to do with the Honorable Premier and the Minister of Home Affairs. If we implement tougher sentencing, Madam Speaker, without proper diversion programs, and especially for those multiple offenders, the result would be a prison filled with those convicted of nonviolent and petty crimes. According to a report conducted by Stanford University, Madam Speaker, half of the inmates serving a life sentence under the 3 strikes are those serving for nonviolent crimes, including stealing loose change from a parked car, possessing less than a gram of narcotics, and attempting to break into a soup kitchen. And Madam Speaker, according to Wikipedia, on the 3 strikes, California in November 2000 voted to scale the 3 strikes year out to offer drug treatment rather than life in prison. It also went on to say that the 3 strikes year out costs $500 million per year to implement and creates other social and economic costs which are associated with the policy. Madam Speaker, again, the statistics that I gave that the Honorable Member from East End made reference of tells us in this House that not enough of the preventative type of sentencing is happening. But Madam Speaker, I would rather see one of our young people rehabilitated, educated, and reintegrated into society as a contributing member of our community than to see them spend a lifetime in jail. And Madam Speaker, a budget of $15 million per year to operate Her Majesty's Prison, it would make more sense to me that we take advantage of prisoners when they are there and have them attend serious rehabilitative programs such as the programs I mentioned in my debate on my private member's motion. Madam Speaker, we have got to introduce programs, as I said, such as restorative justice. We have got to look at doing things like attaching conditions for our young people in prisons that they cannot graduate without, they cannot leave the prison without achieving certain academic achievements. We have to offer them technical and vocational types of training within the prison, and we have to offer them alcohol and drug rehabilitation if needed. And Madam Speaker, we should attach that to their sentencing, that they cannot leave, or perhaps they get shorter sentencing if they complete these programs. And not just programs, Madam Speaker, that we pay lip service to, but real programs. Madam Speaker, if we do not focus on preventative and early intervention programs coupled with proper rehabilitation of our prisoners, the rate of recidivism and inherent criminals, Madam Speaker, will continue to rise. Along with that, Madam Speaker, will be the cost of policing and the cost of housing prisoners. Madam Speaker, I stand here today to say that I support the government considering this motion, but I also plea that when we are considering this motion and when we're considering the 3 strikes you're out, that we at the same time pay very, very close consideration and very, very committed and commit ourselves very, very much to making use of our offenders when they are in custody, to making the best of the time when they are there in prison, Madam Speaker. And Madam Speaker, if we are going to say to our young people or to any one of our citizens that after 3 strikes you are going to serve a minimum of 10 years, we have got to do everything we can do in those 3 previous convictions to rehabilitate them. Otherwise, Madam Speaker, we are failing them and we are failing our country, and all we are going to do is add to the cost of our prison services and swell the population of the prison. So, Madam Speaker, I agree wholeheartedly. Let us look at what was done in the past. Let us review what happened in California. Let us take a tough stance on crime, but let us put our money where our mouths are when it comes to rehabilitating and preventing crime from happening in this country, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, as far as the pawn shops are concerned, I don't think I have to say much more about that. I congratulate the member from Northside on his tough stance on those. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Elected member from Bordentown.
Thank you. Madam Speaker, I too rise to support the motion before the House. I see it complementing what the 6th elected member brought a few days ago. See it as a comprehensive approach to trying to deal with crime. Madam Speaker, you, and I'm sure those of us that have been here a while, remember 12 to 15 years ago when we talked about reviewing the penal code, not just certain sections. I know we made amendments to some of it, but I think we should consider getting back to that in putting some teeth into the laws. Madam Speaker, the continual breakdown of the family unit. If we trace back, most of these incidents come from broken homes, some children with one parent. Madam Speaker, in this day and age when I don't look at the internet, but I made to understand, and I know TV programs, all they seem to do, Madam Speaker, is glamorize crimes and criminals. We need to be, as parents, soul searchers to make sure that we know what their children are watching when they're especially when they're by themselves, watching on the television and watching on the internet. I remember, Madam Speaker, which you will too, several years ago, when we first talked about this, we talked about early interventions and to bring parents to more accountability. And I specifically remember the Honorable Premier advocating years ago, they should attend juvenile court with these children and not just the social workers. So, Madam Speaker, just wanted to offer my support to this. As I said, it can complement, and we are in a position as legislators, we have to keep trying. We cannot legislate for everything, but we need to look at this in the comprehensive manner which we are now starting to do, and I hope with God's help we can make a difference. Thank you.
Does any other member wish to speak? The Minister responsible for health.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, let me commend the mover of this motion and also the 6th elected member from Georgetown for his motion and for his contribution just now, and for my colleague, the 1st elected member from Bowden Town. As the mover of this motion alluded to, Madam Speaker, we have in our communities chronic, perpetual thieves and burglars. Some of them, I think by now might get some criticism for this, but some of them are beyond redemption. They've been doing it too long. They've had a lifetime of it. They're in and out, in and out, in and out. And as the member from Northside said, quite rightly, the spikes are there to prove when they're out, and everything is quiet when they're in. But Madam Speaker, I would like to be a part of a community that's building bigger schools and having better sports, bigger stadiums than one that's known for bigger prisons. I think that, as the member from Georgetown said just now, we need to definitely focus very much on preventative measures. And it has to be from school. Can't wait until the tree is old and strong to try to bend it. You got to bend it when it's young and pliable. And as Minister of Youth, Minister of Sports, we work every day to improve what's happening with our young people through the youth policy, through our sports policy. We work hand in hand with education to try and improve things together across the school system. But at the end of the day, Madam Speaker, a lot depends on our society and parenting in our society. Because you know when your child is going astray. If you're paying attention as a parent, you should know. And parents, I've called on them before from this forum, need to be parents, and parents need to take responsibility and be held accountable for a lot of the actions that we see as these young people develop. Because you don't usually reach the age of 30 or 40 and start to become a thief or a burglar. Occasionally, someone at late age will get hooked on drugs and things will happen to them. We've seen that too. But generally, the life of crime starts quite young, and one thing leads to the next, and you get that invincible feeling. And then you get that no care feeling where just another little run into Northwood to get my dental and my health checks, get into the gym and pump some iron and come out looking good. And within a few weeks, a couple of months, you're right back down the same old gutter. We need to break that cycle, that vicious cycle. I was very happy yesterday to be privy to what's coming in some of our rehabilitation laws that we're looking at, and getting people back into the community, getting people back on track. Because, Madam Speaker, people will say, someone may look at this motion and say, well, it's, it's just talking about burglars, but let me tell you that a burglar is a bad thing because, you see, although you may not be talking about aggravated burglary now, who knows when an individual is caught doing something that they shouldn't be doing, how they will react. And there goes a very serious incident. So I don't take it lightly. And the actions of the pawn shops in this whole thing, I know that the police have a certain view. I have my own view. I think that since they've come on the scene, we've seen an increase in certain activities. I think that police sometimes see them as an advantage to have, to be able to trace things and use them for information, a bit like other things that they make use of to track criminals. But I think that we need to rein them in as well. And the second-hand dealer bill that is in the works will pay particular attention to those. But crime is a very, very serious thing, Madam Speaker. And a country that has an economy based on tourism and finance, and coming from the background just some 40 years ago, 30 years ago, where this place was tranquil and you could leave your homes, your property unattended, opened, to where we are now. If we're not careful, Madam Speaker, all that we're fighting for all the other times, all the finance, all the bills that we're bringing, everything else will all just not be worth the penny, the paper that they're written on, because you won't be able to stay here. We're not there yet, and a lot of people say we're still paradise to many, and that's true. But the signs are there, Madam Speaker. The signs are there. It's quite scary, when you pay attention to sometimes what you see on Facebook, and you see young people with guns, drugs, and money next to them, and you wonder, this can't be Cayman. Well, it is Cayman. And you wonder, well, why the police can't catch them? Because they're up on Facebook. So, Madam Speaker, we have to take these things serious. And I commend the member from Northside for making another attempt at reining in some of the writings on the wall. We know, we've spoken about this before, with the vacation homes that are in his district and in others that are being broken into, stolen from regularly. I have friends who own some of those homes, and I know for a fact that some of them are thinking about selling. Some of them are, at one time the wife would come on her own and the husband would stay back. Now she's scared to come on her own. Or she comes, she has a big stick or something next to her bed, which mightn't be any use. Serious times, and we have to be tough on crime. My first elected colleague from Bontown likes to say, you can't push a foot with this. It's time to get tough. So I commend the mover, and I commend those who have spoken, and I hope that the motion will pass safely through this House. But one thing I'd caution about too, before I sit, is that private members' motions have a way of being like reports that we commission. They collect a lot of dust. I remember being here and having what I thought two in particular that I always remember, two motions that passed beautifully and haven't seen the light of day up to now. One was on minimum property standards, the other was on long-term mental health. Well, thank God I'm Minister of Health now, and we're going to have mental health facilities. And again, that goes really into this as well, because a lot of these folk who are committing these crimes, they need serious help. And I'm not putting them down at all. Some of them really need help. And they're crying out in many cases. Some of them want protection. They want protection from themselves. So, Madam Speaker, it's all convoluted, you see. You can't, it's like a deck of dominoes. You can't stand them up and hit one and the rest don't fall. It's all joined up. And therefore, our ministries have to work closely together. We have to work closely together as a government, administrative, political, judicial, our prison services, and opposition, everybody. We have to work closely to make the right steps and ask God's guidance, wisdom in all that we do for our people. Thank you.
Does any other member wish to speak? The second elected member from the District of Georgetown.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'll rise this time so I won't get overlooked like it was earlier. Thank you for the opportunity, Madam Speaker, to address this very motion as well that's before the House. Like the one before, by my colleague sitting to my left, I'm delighted this evening also to lend my support to the motion as it currently is before the House, and congratulate the member from Northside for bringing it. Madam Speaker, my view is that this motion sorry, not the motion, but that the present system as it exists no longer acts as the true deterrent that it was intended to be. And the issues of the continuing escalation of crime and the seriousness of it needs to be addressed. I view the motion and the efforts to bring in the three strikes in your route as being one facet of what clearly is a very multifaceted issue and problem. And while we are seeking to increase and put the deterrence factor, I am also mindful that there are efforts that need to be made with regard to the prevention. Madam Speaker, like every other member of this House, I also received the memo from the President of the Youth Act encouraging us not to accept this motion. Madam Speaker, I truly support the efforts of the Youth Act and what they are trying to accomplish, and the efforts and programs that they are promoting in trying to deter and to help rehabilitate people who have erred and gone astray. But that is just one aspect of it too, and it's part of what I perceive to what needs to be a holistic and comprehensive approach to crime and to deterrence. Their efforts are to be commended. They deserve to succeed. And in my view, if they do succeed, they will seek and help to deter a lot of crime from actually taking place, so that the three strikes you wrote doesn't really come into play. It's of no consequence. But I also recognize too that in society, Madam Speaker, that there are some who, no matter what you do, decide that they are not going to conform and will not seek to live and to work within the law. And the law must be there to punish and to do its very best to deter. And that's for these reasons why I strongly support the concept of three strikes you're out. In many ways, some ways too, Madam Speaker, in my own home and raising three children, we had a similar sort of thing. If I told you, had to tell you 3 times, 3 strikes, you're out, you were going to get punished. It worked quite well, Madam Speaker. Very seldom did I ever have to implement it and to act. But I had to do so. And when that line was crossed and the discipline was applied, I have to say probably 100% of the time, the offense was not committed ever again. And it was all a part of parenting and teaching my children as they grew, that there had to be that respect for authority, and there were rules and boundaries upon which they were not to step outside of, or else there would be consequences. And I view that today as, as the same in the wider society. And these things are not necessarily designed to be mean or but really to ensure that society and civil society is able to function, and that people who do break the law are dealt with in an effective way. So, Madam Speaker, also just a few comments on the second-hand dealers law, which has been mentioned here as well, which I'm aware of and have seen a copy of. And I'm aware that it is a very advanced stage of development within the government. I have to say, it is only within the last 6 to 8 months that I truly became aware of the number of second-hand dealers in this country and of the effects that this industry that has grown up over the last maybe 5 to 10 years, how, having been completely unregulated, it has contributed to the proliferation of the, best way to describe it, of the laundering of stolen goods, and how it has facilitated criminals in disposing of those goods, thereby receiving cash in exchange. And I agree very strongly that there needs to be legislation such like this that puts rules and policies in place that govern the operations of these entities, that they too must conform to good governance in their operations, thereby ensuring that the type of business that they conduct is legitimate, that it is not the proceeds of crime, and that they too must conform with knowing their customers and the people who they are dealing with. So I say that I welcome all of these things in terms of the second-hand dealers bill when it is brought forward to this legislature, and I commend to the 3 strikes you're out legislation to this House this afternoon. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Does any other member wish to speak? Does any other member wish to speak? The 5th elected member from Georgetown, followed by the 4th elected member from Bordentown.
I was a little faster than him this time. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I rise in support of the private member's motion number 9, 2014-2015, which is brought by the member from Northside. Madam Speaker, I indicated that I would, on Friday, support this motion. I'm young enough to remember, Madam Speaker, when politicians in this honorable House ignored calling a spade, ignored situations, commenting on gangs or groups of boys as they were called back then. Madam Speaker, there was a time when I used to drive anywhere in West Bay. That time has long passed. But Madam Speaker, to be fair to my colleague from West Bay, there are other parts of the country that I won't go after certain hours. And Madam Speaker, I think, and in my heart of hearts, I think that's because we as a country, we as legislators, we as a people ignored or chose to ignore what was happening in front of us, what was developing into a cancer. And Madam Speaker, when people are as brazen as to be in the middle of Georgetown during a workday, rob a bank in high traffic, when people as brazen when the lifeblood of this country is tourism and finance, to rob jewelry stores with guns and masks first thing in the morning. Madam Speaker, it shows me that it's gone too far. And whilst I have great sympathy with some of the people that have contacted me about this motion, and whilst I agree wholeheartedly that it might not be the answer, this, I believe, is something that would be supported by the majority of my constituents. It's something that I believe is necessary to show that those who would thwart the laws of society, no matter what their background or mental health is, we have to answer them sometimes in the same vein as they bring it to us. Madam Speaker, when this motion was put down for reading, I read the Yolanda report on crime, just to look over it again and see where the balance could come in. And Madam Speaker, like I said, this may not be the answer. And I think the answer lies somewhere along the lines as what some of my colleagues have already indicated in their support for the motion. We have to, as a community, try to deal with this. We know who some of these individuals are long before they start carrying out crimes. We see them in their home environment. We see them in school. We see them in other organized activities, including church groups, etc. And the old people used to say, you got to watch that one. Madam Speaker, if we see these things as parents, as pastors, as teachers, as neighbors, and we don't try to address them, if we don't try to bring attention to them when they're molehills, how can we then, when it's gone too far, try to reset that button, assuage our consciences, and say, let's slap them on the wrist because it wasn't their fault? Madam Speaker, education, religious guidance, all these things are interventions that each and every member of this society, and I know that everybody in this room grew up in a time when anybody on the street could clap you if you were misbehaving. Madam Speaker, everybody in here grew up in a time when if you were out and you were misbehaving, before you got home, your parents knew what you had done. And you better not lie, you better not try to say, I wasn't doing something, because you were going to get it twice. Madam Speaker, when we see these criminal profiles, when we see the badly behaved boys and girls at an early age, that is the time for intervention. You can't look at somebody that's as a rap sheet longer than some novels, having tried or not tried in the past to do anything about it, and then keep giving them a slap on the wrist. Because I believe crime escalates, and the criminal intent, the criminal wrongdoing escalates over time. Some people will be past the point of no return. We heard from some of the ministers that they will be doing their part in their ministries, that there are some of my other colleagues spoke about other motions and bills that will move to try to add some support to at least slowing down some of these behaviors. But Madam Speaker, the one thing that we often forget, and the sixth elected member from Georgetown raised this in his motion on Friday night. We forget the victims sometimes, Madam Speaker. What do we say to those people when we say it was because somebody's background and their upbringing and their family circumstances that they just killed my son or they just robbed my place? Are we expected for them to say, I understand that they had a bad background, so they're welcome to my property. They're welcome to come into my home and do what they do to my family. Madam Speaker, there's a debt to society that's owed when you break society's laws. I wholeheartedly, Madam Speaker, echo the sentiments that were already said, including the need for balance, including the need for us as legislators to try to rehabilitate when we can. I wholeheartedly agree. We need to intervene early. We need to put 100% effort into doing so. But when we've done all that we can as a society, and when we've gotten to the place where we have individuals that don't fear the law, don't fear the consequences, don't care about life, grieving families, destruction, theft. Madam Speaker, we need a harsh response to those types of individuals. And we need to stop justifying their actions. Madam Speaker, there are some issues that we are, as a country, have failed to do and still continue to fail to do when it comes to that side of things. And I say rehabilitation, intervention, etc. We need to endeavor to do better, and as lawmakers, that's part of our tasks. But also as lawmakers, we answer the people of the Cayman Islands, and I believe that the sentiments raised by the member from Northside also echo what society wants at this stage. So, in those few words, Madam Speaker, I fully support the member from Northside, and I will be voting yes on this motion. And I will be voting yes when the time comes to count.
The fourth elected member from the District of Bordentown.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I also rise to give my support to this private member's motion. And I want to begin by thanking the member from Northside for putting this important motion forward. And to the member from East End for assisting him in doing that. Madam Speaker, most of the people who have spoken before me, the members who have spoken prior to me, have outlined in great detail their concerns with crime and its effects on these islands, and their sentiment that we need to be tougher on crime. We need to ensure that we're not too soft on crime, because we have seen a significant change in recent times, Madam Speaker, where our islands are no longer considered the safe sanctuary that they once were. And we have seen, Madam Speaker, where over time conditions here have changed. Our people are now a lot more careful at night. They're a lot more careful about their possessions, their homes, their children. And there is a constantly rising fear among the communities that crime is becoming a little bit out of control and that the government needs to do something about it. Madam Speaker, I've attended numerous meetings in Bordentown with the police, the community meetings that the police have held, and I can account for what has happened firsthand from listening to the individuals who have attended those meetings and voiced their concerns. And there is significant concern in Bordentown, in particular, with robberies and home invasions. I know that the police have been tasked with keeping our district safe, and I fully support them in all that they're trying to do. But I've also listened carefully to the police and the officers who are tasked with that awesome responsibility. And I do believe that more can be done to assist the police. I think that we need to get back to a point where the community has a better relationship with the police. I've seen many times, Madam Speaker, where the community has become unhappy with actions taken by the police, or the lack of action, or the deployment of resources. This is strategic decisions that have been made. But I don't think we get anywhere by standing up and criticizing the police, because they do perform a job that not many of us would choose to do, and they have to be commended for that. Many of them put their lives on the line to protect ours. So what I want to encourage in this legislature is more support for the police. Where there is something that needs to be corrected, let's correct it, but let's not sit back and wait for the inevitable. Madam Speaker, I believe in rehabilitation and I believe in prevention. I learned quite some time ago in dealing with my own child that once a child hits the age of 13, they're pretty much matured in their thought patterns and their likes and dislikes and their characteristics. It's prior to age 13 that you have to get a hold of children, Madam Speaker, and make them understand right from wrong and how they're to conduct themselves within society. If we leave them, children with problems, if we leave them for too long, they develop into adults with problems. And I think we're seeing quite a bit of that. And I'm going to chastise some of the parents, because I've seen examples of bad parenting. I've seen parents who encourage bad behavior in their children.
And I've seen that for a number of years to the point where it's now showing its face in the district. Most families, Madam Speaker, successful families practice what I consider tough love. And I think that is the stance that this government must take. We have to ensure that we offer every opportunity to our young people to make something of themselves. Make sure that they get the right education, the right opportunities, jobs, and I'll talk a bit more about that a little later on. But when they do mess up, we need to practice tough love. This motion calls for harsher punishment for adults. What I would like to see is something in the middle of that spectrum where we can actually get a hold of young offenders, young problem children, children who are exhibiting a certain behavior or propensity to become adult problems, and deal with them. I know we have various institutions here that were designed for that, but I do feel that lately and in recent years, the focus on those institutions has fallen off. And we need to ensure that going forward, we focus on those. We can't, Madam Speaker, have the good suffering for the bad. We need to ensure that whenever we highlight issues with our young people, that we deal with them. And we have to focus on environmental factors that encourage criminal activity. Drugs, poverty, gangs, all of those are encouraging a degeneration of our young people. It is causing major problems for the police, major problems in the communities, and in the long run, it's going to affect and touch each and every person living in our communities. This motion, Madam Speaker, calls for harsher sentences, and I do believe that we have been a bit soft on crime historically, and I think it was maybe a disbelief that we would ever reach this point. We've even gotten to the stage where we happily clear criminal records for individuals who have proven that they have made the effort to improve themselves and become productive members of society. And I fully support that. But prevention starts from an early age, and we don't want to actually get to the point where we have to be expunging criminal records. We want to get to the point where we have a productive set of young people coming out of our high schools who can take their rightful place in society and become productive members of society, not criminals that we have to rehabilitate. One of the major concerns, Madam Speaker, obviously, is jobs. We talked about this in this very sitting in the House when dealing with another motion. I can't say it enough times. I can't give it enough emphasis. Our young people are becoming criminalized by the mere fact that some of them can no longer afford to take care of themselves or their families. I have seen way too many of them come into my office, Madam Speaker, asking for assistance, asking me to help them find jobs, some asking for assistance to buy food to feed their families. It becomes overwhelming at times. And me and the other 3 representatives in Borden Town don't have the resources or the ability to help each and every one. So we have to tackle this problem from another level. We need to get tough on crime, but we also need to get tough on employers who refuse to hire our young people. We have to lead the way and show our young people that we haven't forgotten about them and that we're here looking out for them and providing opportunities for them. We have a responsibility to try to better the lives of every one of the constituents that put us in this house, this honorable house. And when I see the way that some of our young people are going, it really concerns me. The problem is becoming an epidemic, and I am fortunate enough to have gained the respect of some of those individuals, and they do come and share their concerns with me. When I'm out and about in the district, they do talk to me, and I think I have a good grasp of what is going wrong, and I'm thankful that I am a part of the government and a government that is willing to do something about it. The second elected member from Bordentown spoke about what he's seen on social media, on Facebook. As recent as yesterday, we were discussing some of those images. Young Caymanians, probably not even 13, 14 years old, posing in pictures, holding firearms, flashing gang signs, holding drugs in their hands, money, cash, more cash than any of us in here make. And you wonder what's gone wrong. Madam Speaker, when the dust settles and everything clears, we are going to be here. None of us have any plans to go anywhere else. And that problem is going to be right here in our laps to deal with. So either we deal with it now or we wait till it gets worse and we have a problem that we can't resolve. I don't believe, Madam Speaker, that we should allow businesses to remain and operate here if they are in some way, shape, or form profiting from crime. The police have explained, and I think that normally you wouldn't hear a policeman tell you point blank that he's concerned about pawn shops and other types of businesses that have popped up around here. But when the police get to the point where they speak out publicly against it, we need to listen. The pawn shops are facilitating criminal activity, and whether it's intentional or not, it needs to stop, because they are providing a market for stolen property, and that property comes from the homes of decent, law-abiding Caymanians. So I fully support this motion, Madam Speaker, and I fully support bringing the pawn shops under control. I'm also happy, Madam Speaker, to see that this entire House seems to be united in standing to deal with this important issue. I've noticed this is becoming a trend when it comes to issues of national importance, and I want to commend everyone in this House that has chosen to support this motion so far. It shows that we are right-minded, we are working for the right people, and we're working together. And I think that is the government that the people elected not too long ago. And Madam Speaker, with those few short words, I just want to encourage everyone to support this motion, and I certainly will be voting yes.
Does any other member wish to speak? Does any other member wish to speak? Final call. Does any member wish to speak? Member from North Side, please exercise your right of reply.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I just wanted to thank all honorable members for supporting the motion. And I can assure the 6th elected member for Georgetown that I too believe very strongly in rehabilitation. I took a lot of stick here in 1989 when I tabled the one and only national drug plan this country has ever produced. And the emphasis of that was demand reduction through education with an emphasis on rehabilitation. And I made a statement that the drug plan was looking to the future, because those who were already hooked on drugs, that generation may have to be written off. Boy, didn't I take a stick for making that statement. But I believe in the interim period, because we didn't follow the demand reduction mode through education and the rehabilitation, we have now succeeded in writing off at least 3 or 4 generations. So I believe in rehabilitation, but some of these people, particularly the ones I talk about in my constituency, some of them I have personally tried to rehabilitate. At least 2 of them I have found 4 jobs for in the last 3 or 4 years. And I know other people in the community that try to give them employment, try to encourage them not to do. But the truth is, they are better off at Northwood than they are at home. They get, as the Minister of Health said, they get their free health care, they get 3 square meals a day, they got a dry roof over their head, they watch TV, and if you listen to them, they get all the drugs they want. So they're a lot better off in Northwood. So I think we need to help them out, put them in for about 10 years, and at least we have a long time to work on rehabilitating them. And they're confined to where we can read. If we can't influence them in 10 years, we're not going to be able to influence them in 1 year. So I hope that the motion doesn't die the fate predicted by the Minister of Health, but that we can look forward to, at least in November, some amendments to the penal code to address both of the anti-crime motions that were approved here today. Because all of us know that it's not all the answers, but at least it is one. It is part of the answer. And for those who are borderline, those who understand long-term incarceration, it will help to prevent them from actually going down the route of crime. So I thank all honorable members for their support, Madam Speaker. I'll be grateful when you get it too. So one time, how many times I thank the government? At least 3 times in that little speech, right?
Member from Northside, you had some stats that you wanted table, and I so order that it's now tabled for the purposes of the record.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The question is that, be it therefore resolved that the government considers introducing legislation to regulate pawn shops and other business that may accept stolen goods and severe penalties for handling stolen goods, including closing of the business and their 3rd offense. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, no.
No.
I believe the ayes have it. Accordingly, motion 9, 2014-2015 is accordingly passed. We'll now take the break for the afternoon. We should make all endeavors to be back by 6:30.